Okay, so today's reading lesson, it's lesson 6, Writing for a Purpose. You are going to be reading excerpts of stories and then trying to figure out what was the author's purpose for writing that. So remember, we know that authors write to persuade us, to inform us, or to entertain us. So what I'm going to do, and like I've done in previous videos, I'm going to read the excerpt. Once you're finished, and you don't have to listen to me read it, but if you're wanting to listen to me, listen to it, click pause, answer the question or two that goes with it, and then come back and play the next story. So this one's going to give us bits and pieces of several different stories to try and figure out why their authors wrote those, what that purpose was. So the first one, it says it's an excerpt from the novel Black Beauty. So we've done a little bit with this at the beginning of the year. The first place that I can well remember was a large, pleasant meadow with a pond of clear water in it. Some shady trees leaned over it, and rushes and water lilies grew in the deep end. Over the hedge on one side we looked into a plowed field, and on the other we looked over a gate at our master's house, which stood by the roadside. At the top of the meadow was a grove of fir trees, and at the bottom a running brook overhung by a steep bank. While I was young, I lived upon my mother's milk, as I could not eat the grass. In the daytime I ran by her side, and at night I lay down close by her. When it was hot, we used to stand by the pond in the shade of the trees, and when it was cold, we had a nice warm shed near the grove. As soon as I was old enough to eat grass, my mother used to go out to work in the daytime and come back in the evening. There were 6 young colts in the meadow besides me. They were older than I was. Some were nearly as large as grown-up horses. I used to run with them, and we had great fun. We used to gallop all together round and round the field as hard as we could go. Sometimes we had rather rough play, for what they would frequently bite and kick as we gallop. One day, when there was a good deal of kicking, my mother whinnied to me to come to her, and she said, "I wish you to pay attention to what I'm going to say to you. The colts who live near here are very good colts, but they are cart race horses, and of course they have not learned manners. You have been well bred and well born. Your father has a great name in these parts, and your grandfather won the cup 2 years at the Newmarket races. Your grandmother had the sweetest temper of any horse I ever knew, and I think you have never seen me kick or bite. I hope you will grow up gentle and good. And never learn bad ways. Do your work with a good will. Lift your feet up when you trot, and never bite or kick even in play." I've never forgotten my mother's advice. I knew she was a wise old horse, and our master thought a great deal of her. Her name was Duchess, but he often called her Pet. Our master was a good, kind man. He gave us good food, good lodging, and kind words. He spoke as kindly to us as he did to his little children. We were all fond of him, and my mother loved him very much. When she saw him at the gate, she would neigh with joy and trot up to him. He would pat and stroke her and say, "Well, old Pat, and how is your little darky?" I was a dull black, so he called me Darky. Then he would give me a piece of bread, which was very good, and sometimes he brought a carrot for my mother. All the horses would come to him, but I think we were his favorites. My mother always took him to the town on market day in a light gig. There was a plowboy Dick who sometimes came into our field to pluck blueberries from the hedge. When he had eaten all he had wanted, he would have what he called fun with the colts, throwing stones and sticks at them to make them gallop. We did not much mind him, for we could gallop off, but sometimes a stone would hit us and hurt us. One day he was at the gate and did not know that the master was in the next field, but he was there, watching what he was doing. Over the hedge he jumped in a snap, and catching Dick by the arm, he gave him such a box on the ear as he made him roar with pain and surprise. As soon as we saw the master, we trotted up nearer to see what went on. "Bad boy," he said, "bad boy to chase the colts. This is not the first time, nor the second, but it shall be the last. There, take your money and go home. I shall not want you on my farm again." So we never saw Dick any more. Old Daniel, the man who looked after the horses, was just as gentle as our master, so we were well off. Okay, so you can pause. There's only one question about the author's purpose, and then you can come back for the next section. Okay, this is the Underground Railroad. To help escaped slaves make a safe journey, caring individuals in the North created a series of trails, transportation, safe houses, and guides. These people and safe routes became known as the Underground Railroad. The organized groups that did this work used railroad terms to describe the escaped slaves, workers, routes, and places to stop. These were conductors, cargo, stations, agents, tickets, and station masters. The Underground Railroad began with the efforts of the Quakers of Pennsylvania. They agreed as early as the 1780s to assist runaway slaves. George Washington made mention of this group in a letter in 1788. As more people began to disagree with slavery, the Underground Railroad became more organized, widespread, and effective. One organizer, William Steele, has been called the father of the Underground Railroad. Just before the Civil War, Mr. Steele was helping about 60 slaves escape to freedom every month. He also helped freed slaves communicate with their families that they had left behind. The most famous person involved in the Underground Railroad is Harriet Tubman. She was an escaped slave herself. Harriet put herself at great personal risk by returning to the South on these trips to help others gain their freedom. Because of her fearlessness and leadership, she was lovingly called Moses by those she served, after an Old Testament leader who led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. The Underground Railroad was a well-organized, compassionate, and effective system of helping slaves get to the North. In the 10 years preceding the Civil War, between 30,000 and 100,000 slaves used it to gain their freedom. You can stop and pause the video, answer the question, and come back for the third passage. Okay, this one, it might be my favorite just by the title. It's called A Brief History of Chocolate. Chocolate has been around for over 4,000 years. It has a very interesting history that is thought to have begun in the jungles of the Amazon. The chocolate you are familiar with today starts out as the humble cacao bean. It was the Mayans, then later the Aztecs, that discovered the value of the cacao plant that chocolate's made from. The word chocolate can be traced all the way back to the Mayan word, I'm not even going to attempt it, which the Aztecs later adopted. Today, anyone can buy a chocolate candy bar from a local store. In Mayan society, only the elite could enjoy chocolate. In ancient times, chocolate was served as an unsweetened drink made from ground-up beans. The ancient version of hot chocolate was a cold drink made up of chocolate and spicy peppers. In fact, for the most of the history of chocolate, it was mostly only consumed as a drink and had no sugar in it. This is a different twist on hot chocolate, nothing like what we know of hot chocolate, a sweet and warm drink enjoyed on cold nights. Chocolate was so valuable that the cacao bean was used as a currency or money for a very long time. It was used for many medicinal purposes as a cure for illnesses as well. It was also used and consumed to mark very important occasions, marriages, births, and deaths. Sweetened chocolate did not appear until the Europeans brought it back from the Americas in the 17th century. It became a fashionable drink in Europe among the very wealthy and elite. In 1828, a Dutch chemist found a way to make cocoa powder. His cocoa powder eventually allowed people to create the first chocolate bar. By 1868, a company called Cadbury began selling boxes of chocolate in England. Later, another company called Nestle began selling chocolate milk. Today, chocolate is a multi-billion-dollar industry in just the United States alone. The average American eats or drinks at least half a pound of chocolate per month. Chocolate is a treat that is cherished and loved by many. So that is, those are your 3 passages. And then at the end of this lesson, you're going to pick, you get to choose what you write about. Either you're going to choose to write something short, 5 sentences. That's not much. You're either going to persuade a reader to do something, inform a reader of something, or entertain a reader of something, and I'll be your reader. So, 5 sentences on that, and it gives you a breakdown in the outline in the lesson. So you will be doing that.